I bet you were beating the hell out of that thing last night, weren't you?
He was beating
really going to have
last
to.
night. It wasn't that.
You're really going to have to watch the video to see what Roger's talking about. Hey, so we all three have something in common with Joe Biden. As of yesterday, we all four voted for Trump,
and his wife. Jill voted for Trump too.
There's no way she didn't.
When she wore that, you see, wearing that red dress or whatever the heck it was, like she was making a statement. There's no doubt in my mind.
Yeah, 100%. It's like when Melania wore that jacket that said "I don't care" on the back. She was absolutely making a statement. 100%.
That's so awesome.
It feels kind of surreal today to me. Things feel surreal. I can't explain it. I have not been out yet, but I think that. Do you guys think the left is just like still in shock, trying to take a collective breath and figure out which way they're going to take this? Because they definitely went to racism today, but just kind of crazy, man.
Wait till it sinks in that they lost the popular vote. I mean, that's the thing. Right now, it's all the electoral vote, and you still got some House seats out there that they're going to lose. They're going to lose. They've lost majority of the Senate. When they actually sit down and realize that they lost the popular vote for the first time in like 20 years or something like that, that's when the poop's going to hit the fan then. But I will tell you this, they're happy, dude. The only person who is unhappy right now is Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, right? Because when you look at it, and we've been saying this in previous episodes, but everybody got what they wanted. We got the win that we wanted with Trump winning to be the next president again. DNC, they got rid of the angry black woman. Remember, we talked about this months and months ago. Hey, what do you do with the Kamala problem? Well, this is what you do with the Kamala problem is you run her, you let her run. You don't help her. You set her up for failure along the way. If she got any more help from Bill Clinton or Biden or Mark Cuban, I mean, her campaign was going down in flames, from the inside, right? I mean, she couldn't move, get out of the way of the rounds that were coming from inside the house. So the DNC got what they wanted. They got rid of her, but more importantly, it's a clean slate for 2028. Because I would tell you what, I feel good, man, because not only are we done with the Bushes, right? We're done with the Cheneys. I think she's effectively, who knows what Liz Cheney even goes to do, after this, but we're done with Barry. He's not going to be around another 4 years. I mean, he's getting older, right? How much of an influence is he going to have? The Clintons, done with the Clintons, done with the Bidens, man. 2028 is going to, I know we're already bringing it up, but 2028 is going to be lit because it's going to be a lot of fresh blood. Names that have been in the news that we know, the Shapiros and the Newsoms and the Ron DeSantis and, possibly a JD Vance or whatever, but it is going to be a clean slate for both parties. Trump will have served his second term, so he can't run again. So everybody got what they wanted, man, at the end of the night. I think we'll get into it a little bit more. But the Democrats and the left started to believe their own BS, right? It's like, they know they're full of crap. I mean, even the pundits today on MSNBC, listening to these guys and gals, like they knew this going into it. I mean, they knew it. And then, eventually they just started buying into it. They started buying into their own lies. So at the end of the day, man, everybody got what they wanted. I'm happy.
It's funny you mentioned that, we're done with the Clintons and the, and the Bushes, and the, the Obamas and everything. You know who else we're done with? The old guard of the GOP. The old guard of the GOP is dead. It is gone. It is done. The Lindsey Grahams, the Mitch McConnells, that GOP, our parents' GOP, and the one we grew up with, gone, done. This is now Donald Trump's and, essentially JD Vance's and everybody else's, that's hitched their wagon to him. This is their GOP now. And it is going to be very telling in the next 24 months because I know they haven't officially called the House races yet, but we're going to take the House. We're going to, deepen our lead in the House. We have the Senate. We obviously have the White House. They're going to have 24 months to get done what they need to get done, right? And there is no excuse for, oh, we couldn't get this through. We couldn't, we had recess. Oh, there weren't people who got on board. hopefully this was a wake up call for the Dan Crenshaws and the other rhinos out there to, hey man, if you don't get on board, the machine that just, basically damn near swept the table, who just had just routed Kamala Harris across the nation, it's gonna turn its attention to you, and you don't want that. It was epic. I mean, that was right. And they still haven't called Arizona. He's at what, 301 now, 302 in electoral votes, and they still haven't called Arizona. And it looks like he's going to win Arizona too.
He's going to. Right now, we're still waiting on the Maricopa County ballots because, and dude, this is unbelievable. So, well, two things. First of all, even Rasmussen now is coming out in like 81 million votes. No effing way, right? We talked about this before. No way you got 98.15% turnout or whatever it was. And when you look at her turnout this time, it was consistent with every other election for like the past 5 or 6 or whatever. But with Maricopa County, it's actually a good thing. So the way I understand it, the way I've been reading it, so in the past, like I would go vote at my polling location, and they would collect the ballots from there, and they would take it to the election center, and then the election center turns it over to a third party run back, and they count it and they bring it back to the election center. The chain of custody actually started, from the way I understand it, once it hit the election center. So when the polls took the ballots, the envelopes, and took them to the election center, they didn't know how many they were taking. There was no count. Like, okay, I've got 500 here. I turned in 500 to the election center. Election center says, okay, I've got 500. I'm turning it over to Runback. Runback does the count, comes back and says, here's your 500 ballots. So this year, what they did was they changed it. So now the polls, the polling locations, they have to count the envelopes, right? They don't open them up or anything like that, but they count the envelopes. So your chain of custody starts the minute that ballot's dropped. And, now you have better accountability. But I believe, and I think I heard this, I don't know if I read this anywhere, but I believe they actually have to hand count the envelopes. I guess that would make sense. You just hand count the envelopes. So depending on where you're at or whatever throughout the county, you hand count the envelopes. It takes time. They only drop once a day. And I think their next batch from Maricopa County drops in 2 hours. So at 5 p.m., we should have another large batch, and they are expecting to be done by Sunday.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah, so a couple things, like, so what happened, right? We all pontificated. We all had our little theories. And I think that if you put all of our theories together and discard the stuff we were wrong about, we we had some common threads. And I'll tell you where I was wrong. What remember, because I, in our text group, I would always be like, my heart's telling me this, but my head's telling me that. Right. And my heart was closer than where my head was. Okay. And what I mean by that is, what I have said is he's going to need record turnout, right? He's going to need record turnout. Everybody's going to have to come out. And I had a number in mind, but that number was based on 2020, right? And in the back of my head, I was legitimizing that 81 million number. So I was saying he's going to need 83, right? But what we learned last night was, okay, 2020 was absolutely stolen. I mean, now this is going to get banned from YouTube, but there's no explaining, like Roger was saying, there's no explaining where the 15 some odd million votes came from, where they went. There's no explaining it, other than, well, there are a few explanations, for maybe a couple million votes, but not for that many. So it's like, it was very apparent. So Trump did have really good turnout, right? But one of my things was, with Kamala, in order for Trump to win, he's going to have really good turnout, and she's going to have poor turnout. So I was off on the numbers. And I never really vocalized it like, this is what's going to happen. I never said that. I'm just like, my heart was telling me something similar to last night would happen, which it did. And it was really nice. It's such a good feeling, man. When you go to bed with like literally a smile on your face, that's a good thing. And, it like I was telling Roger or Josh earlier, I think it was Josh, that there was a very palpable point in the Fox News broadcast last night where everybody knew what was going to happen in that newsroom. Now, they weren't going to tell it. It was when Bill Hemmer or whatever was up at the map, and they're like, okay, we got some results coming in. And he sits there and he gets a deer in the headlights look like, What do I do now? So he pretended like it was malfunctioning in his ear, and they kicked it back to the panel for about 2 or 3 minutes, and they kicked it back to Hemmer, and he kept going. This was before North Carolina and Georgia were called. There was a moment they all knew, but it's like, oh my God, we still got a lot of time. We got to keep people on the hook. And even my wife was just like, they know what's going to happen. They're just trying to keep us in front of the TV. And I'm like, so they knew early what was going to happen based on the trends that were going on, I think, kind of in Virginia. And I think Michigan, Wisconsin, they were starting to see stuff up there. They already knew about North Carolina and Georgia. So when they got the initial take from Virginia, maybe Pennsylvania, probably not, but Virginia, Wisconsin, and Michigan, I think they knew. They're like, okay, yeah, this is going to be an electoral landslide. I mean, I've got other thoughts on it, but I don't want to get it all out at one time. It's just a good day, just a good day.
It was early voting, man. The minute they saw, and I think we were all cautiously optimistic. Josh, not so much, but Luke and I were cautiously optimistic. And I kept telling my wife and my son, because we were watching as a family, and it was great because my daughter, my son, everybody was sitting here watching this thing. We stayed up all night. And when you know how it is, the numbers first drop and they're like, oh my Lord, he's down, whatever. I'm like, hey man, those are early voting numbers. And this is good. Like in some of these places, he was almost tied. I forget one of the states. I think it was Pennsylvania that I think he was tied with early voting. It's like 49 to 49%. Right. So it's like, hey, if you're tied under the Donald Trump candidacy, if you're tied with him going into election day voting, you're going to lose. That's the reality of it. I mean, you see such massive swings. So I think, even the Fox News folks, when you got the Carolinas coming out, you've got Georgia coming out, you got Pennsylvania, and you're like, holy cow, man, these early votes, there aren't enough there because they know that those other 15 million aren't going to be there. As an example, when you look at the last several, I just pulled a couple of these up. So, Joe Biden theoretically, and we're already down the ban road anyway. By the way, they banned another episode, one of our early episodes the other day. But when you look at Joe Biden pulling 81 million votes in 2016, and we're talking about the Democrats here, 2016, Hillary Clinton pulled 65 million. 2020, Barack pulled 65 million. 2008, he pulled 69 million. Then it was 59 million. So, I mean, that trend is in that 55 to 65 million. And then all of a sudden you have this 81 million. And then you go back to what I think are more normal numbers, right? You look at where she's sitting at right now, which is 67 million. So that's about right. And it's historically correct. But I think everybody knew, looking at the early voting numbers, once those things started hitting the TV and you're like, wow, he's only, he's within a couple points, if not tied, it's over. And I tell you, even from the very beginning, and I'll kick it over to Josh after this, from the very beginning, dude, look at Guam. We texted about this. Guam's got a Republican legislature for the first time in 16 years. Okay. And then you look at that one town, was it Dixon or whatever it is up in New Hampshire, that split 3-3. Okay. Now I know those are small numbers, like 6 votes, right? That's not a telltale sign or a bellwether or whatever, but it should be because it went 6-0 for Biden. I get the numbers aren't enough. But that tells you right there that you had those same 6 people that went 6-0 for Biden, split their vote and went 3-3 Trump Harris. That's got to tell you that, hey man, this might be indicative of, how a lot of the rest of the country is feeling. And I think by the time you get to the end of this, Josh, would you say he's sitting at like 301 or something like that before Arizona?
Yeah.
And he's going to win Nevada. I mean, this thing's going to be a landslide, dude.
Yeah, right now he's at 301. And that's with Nevada. They're just waiting on Arizona's the last state to
Gotcha.
call. So you brought up mail-in voting. I got some points, and I don't want to hit them all right now. But you brought up mail-in voting, and it took them 4 years to figure it out. I didn't know that some states were going to figure it out, but enough that their ground game and the GOP figured out after 2020. You have to get on board with mail-in voting. You cannot tell people to wait until election day to go do it. The mail-in voting was instrumental to pushing Donald Trump. I won't say push him across the finish line because I mean he walked across the finish line. There was only one point last night where I was kind of like I don't know I don't know how it's going to go and we talked about it. I was getting those 2020 vibes where, hey man, numbers are good. You go to bed at midnight and then you wake up and there's that big spike in the middle of the night. And I kept and maybe, I did not think Donald Trump was going to win because I did not think the establishment was going to let him win. So I was completely 100% wrong on that.
No, but you know what? You weren't far off. I'm going to interrupt you real quick. You're right. I mean, the establishment didn't want him to win, but more so, the establishment didn't want her to win, because I'm telling you, those 15 million votes would have been found if it was somebody else.
Well, I think that yes, you're right, Roger. But a corollary to that would be they weren't willing to put forth the energy like they did in 2020 and really put themselves out there. Let's hold a few of those cards back. Worst case scenario. You know what? I'm probably giving them too much credit, but many episodes when Joe Biden was dropping out, or he was about to, maybe it was right after the debate, I think I said something to the effect of the best course of action for them is to cut their losses and focus on 2028. And I think to a point they did that. The only problem is, man, she spent $1 billion on that campaign. $1 billion. So it's like, wow, okay. But yeah, so I think y'all all right. And yeah, I think, what Josh, the reason I was a little bit more confident last night than, well, probably maybe a little bit more confident, I should say, than 2020, because I was fairly confident, but there weren't the hijinks going on that there was in 2020. I think that Trump really got it together, because remember, our biggest gripe back when he lost in 2020 was, where were all his lawyers? He was scrambling around. He did not have them out there. This time he did. He had lawyers everywhere. So, I mean, dude, I'm telling you, he's definitely going, well, I hope the signs point to he's going to be a better president this time. He definitely ran a better campaign than he did in 2016 or 2020. And I think the dude has grown a little bit. I think he's better at putting himself out there. And to another point, corporate media is almost dead. Like, it is, these big media companies, NBC, CBS, MSNBC, all of these, they need to really figure some stuff out, and they need to do it quick. Because I still believe one of the reasons Trump won was because he and his people were getting on the Sean Ryan show, getting on Theo Vaughn's show, and of course, Joe Rogan. And then having Joe Rogan endorse him the day before the election. I don't know how many votes that drove toward Trump, but it definitely made people a lot more comfortable about voting for him. Probably 100,000 people that affected. I mean, it was a really good campaign. And he spent what, Roger, $400 million?
It was about 440 million.
See, I mean, dude, media's got to figure this out. And, they're crying on X, sending that, they're crying, blaming everything except themselves. And it's like, dude, one of the things I had jotted down too was, and you brought it up, is Trump's campaign. I chided him a little bit after the debate with Biden. It's like, this guy's not, like, it's such a slow start. It was such a slow start to him, really getting out there and campaigning. It was like, what are you doing, dude? Like, it's 90 days until, the ball game, and you're nowhere near, the stadium. It's like, you gotta get moving. But once that campaign got moving, that thing was moving. Like, they did, I forget how many rallies they did, but it was more than he did in 2016. And the future, whoever runs in 2028, assuming right now it's going to be JD Vance, dude, they need to conduct a thorough autopsy on this campaign, how they did it, how they ran it, because it was fantastic. And you brought up, the young vote, and I guarantee you some of that was driven by the Theo Vaughn. It was driven by Joe Rogan, because that's what a lot of young folks are listening to. Sean Ryan, even though Sean Ryan's not, Joe Rogan's not a young guy, but he appeals to the young audience in a lot of ways. And the other thing that my wife actually brought up, because we were talking about this today, in the young vote at the universities and stuff, Trump saw a massive turnout with young voters, more than he did in 2016, more than he did in 2020.
all of those anti-Israel, pro-Palestinian protests on college campuses that were going on, and students have to walk through, a war zone, damn near to get to class. You got you had the UNC frats, holding up the flag, to where they couldn't throw it down. They're getting stuff thrown at them, stuff like that. Like, dude, college age kids had to endure that, and they were like, this is unsustainable. We cannot, this is not okay. So his campaign was brilliant, and they really need to turn around and do a study on that and really do a good autopsy on it to, figure out, what went right and why it went right, because they're going to have to replicate a lot of that in 2020.
And it was truly like a race, right?
Right.
It was truly like a race. It was,
Yeah.
Because I'm with you, Josh. You remember, I think we all three complained about it, and you probably checked the game tape from a couple months ago where we're like, dude, he's got to get moving. Like, he's got to get moving. This is not going to cut it. But what he did, in my view, was he started off at a pace to stay in the field. Like, think about a track race, to stay in the field. And then once, let's say it's a 2-mile race. Once, that he hit that 1 mile point, he started to pick up the pace. And on the last lap, he sprinted the whole way, and figuratively, metaphorically, you look at how he crossed the finish line. The McDonald's thing, quickly followed up by the garbage, showing up in a garbage truck.
Yeah.
It was like, dude, in Michigan, I think he was in Michigan or Wisconsin, one or the other. And dude, it was like that. This is brilliant. And the way they reacted so quickly, like they had to get a wrap for that truck overnight and wrap that truck. And they did it. It's so agile, man. You're right. I mean,
hey, I need to take notes. I need a 40-foot wrap for what? Well, I've got this garbage truck that we're going to wrap.
Yeah. And that dude picked up the phone. He's like, man, I'm going to need a wrap job by tomorrow. And the dude's like, yeah, man, I'm about to leave for the day. It's like, we're putting MAGA on the side of a garbage truck. The guy's like, I got you, fam. Be here in 5 minutes. Click. That's how that conversation went.
Yeah. Yeah. But you're right. They were agile. They were responsive, and they were in touch. Here's the thing. And, I have my issues with Trump, but I think Roger may have said it. He is a once in a generation candidate. He is the only billionaire that I've ever seen in my lifetime that knows how to basically resonate with us, right? He knows he understands the working, the average working American, and he understands how to connect with them, and he resonates with them. And so, like, that's the guy you look at, you're like, I want to go drink a beer with him. I don't want to drink a beer with Elon Musk. I would like to meet Elon Musk and have a conversation with him. I don't want to drink a beer with Elon Musk. I would love to drink a couple beers with Donald Trump, right? Because that would be a hoot. That'd be a big time. He's just, he once in a generation candidate. And the garbage truck thing, brilliant, absolutely genius.
McDonald's,
and he did. Man. I mean, he did what Romney couldn't do, right? I mean, Romney came a wealthy family, and one of the big issues with Romney was, he tried to do the well, let me unbutton my shirt and let me roll my sleeves up and let me, try to pretend I understand the working man and woman or whatever. And Trump never did that. Trump's like, hey man, I'm a billionaire. And he ran on that, which, by the way, I'm too young for this, but from what I've read, that's the way the Kennedys were. JFK didn't run as a poor guy. He didn't run as a man of the people, or I understand the working class. I mean, I shouldn't say that, or, I'm from the working class, that type of, he came from a wealthy family. They were like the 6th wealthiest family in America at the time.
Yeah. He ran as an aristocrat.
Yeah. And people like, sometimes that resonates because people are like, hey, I want to be that way. I want to be. I tell you, it's funny because my son and his girlfriend were here last night. And the minute that it was announced that he won, the first thing out of her mouth was, I can buy a house. These kids are in tune. Now it's going to take a little longer than, than just a couple months or whatever, but these kids are in tune. I will tell you this, and I think this is what you saw, because both of you make great points with his campaign, and especially like in the last, month, 2 months, right? I mean, one, he went, I think, over 60 days straight without a day off. He was doing 3 and 4, campaigns a day, rallies, whatever. But if you listen to him on the Joe Rogan podcast at the very beginning, and I wish Joe Rogan had gone down this road a little bit farther, because one of the first questions he asked him was like, okay, so you show up to the White House on the first day, like, what's going through your mind? Like, what do you do? It's like, hey, do I have a key to the door or whatever? And he didn't really go down that road too much because Donald Trump didn't really seem like he wanted to kind of discuss that. But one thing that I took away from it was, especially when you look at 2016, and then you can apply this to the 2020 election, you don't know what to do. Like in 2016, when he ran, it's like, okay, it's the first time he's running. And then you take it to even like what his comments about when he won. He's like, hey, man, you've got like 200 appointments to make. And he goes, I don't know anybody. Like, I know, 2, 3, 4 folks that you're like, okay. He's like, but I don't know anybody. And the point that he was getting to was you had to rely on a lot of insiders. If he didn't come with his team, he had to rely on a lot of insiders to give him advice, to give him guidance. He even talked about some of his own picks, right? But he's like, hey, this is the pond that I was given to fish out of, and this is all I got. So I've got to do what I can with what I have. What I think happened, and then, with his loss in 2020, I do believe going into this one, he was like, okay, I forget which one of you just said, the lawyers and stuff, like, I'm going to have my team now. Okay. I'm going to have a creative team, my PR guys, gals, my marketing folks. I mean, God knows how many texts did we get, from Donald Trump? He's got he must have 150 throwaway phones, because I got a different text from a different number every time. But I think he had his team together. He brought in folks, whether they were from the outside or, into politics or whatever, and he knew what to expect this time. And so I think when you look at, we'll have to do a future episode here pretty shortly on his cabinet picks, or who we think his cabinet picks are going to be. But I think we're going to see some changes, man. I think you'll see some Pompeos around and that type of stuff. But it would not shock me to see some very big shakeups and some names that we probably have not heard of, or at least run around in the government circles. I mean, I don't know if you guys feel the same, or do you think he sticks with the same, tired, used and reused folks that have been around Washington?
I don't think he does. I think he is going to bring in, the people, because like you said, he's taken a lap and he's like, okay, that did not work out well, by and large. So I think he's going to, I think he's going to go all Trump on it and just do what he wants. And I think, we did for, 2020. I think we do a full episode dedicated to, okay, here's who his cabinet should be, because I got a lot of ideas on that. So sorry, I'll kick it back over to Luke. I know it just took your time.
No, you didn't. So I think that he's going to go with who's most loyal, who stuck with him immediately after the election, who kept giving him money, who kept going out there. There's going to be a certain loyalty test of people he brings in. That's why I'm a little bit wary of RFK Jr., because he's not super loyal to Trump. I mean, there's no way, I think he's going to work hard and all that stuff. And I think overall it's good. But even on the Rogan podcast, Trump was saying, I'm going to have to keep him out of certain things, So I don't think RFK Jr. will be in the inner circle, even though they'll try to play it like that. Tulsi Gabbard, who knows? Who knows what's going to happen with her? I could see her being on the cabinet somewhere. Maybe UN, ambassador to the UN. Yeah, Secretary of Health and Human Services, possibly for RFK Jr. I think he's going to go with folks like Kash Patel. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Kash Patel, but he was a very much trusted insider in the last Trump administration. This Cliff Sims guy who was on Sean Ryan's show. Did you guys listen to that? I haven't
seen that one.
Well, he was a staffer for Trump, moved up really quick. Didn't have a whole lot of exposure to Trump. He was the guy who gave Trump the presidential daily brief. So he was in the intel side of the house. Before he was in the intel side of the house, he was in the communications. He was like deputy communications something for White House staff. And it's funny with Cliff Sims because he wrote a book about his time called, what was it called? Den of Vipers or something like that. And just about, how just the inner workings, everything. And Trump ended up suing him over that book. He sued Cliff Sims, and it ended up that, Trump withdrew the lawsuit because I guess somebody actually around him actually read the book and said, yeah, this doesn't say anything bad about you. So they withdrew the lawsuit. Now Cliff Sims is in the inner circle with Trump again. So listen to the name Cliff Sims, because I think that he will be in the inner circle. Kash Patel as well. maybe DOJ, or maybe back in the intel, maybe national security advisor. But like Josh said, I don't know how much in the inner circle Eric Prince is, but if he is in the inner circle, it'll be great to see him as Secretary of Defense or Secretary of State or national security advisor. I mean, dude, I think he'd be a better Secretary of State than anything, but that's just me. So we'll see, man. The transition team is underway. I've got some folks who are kind of on the inside with Trump, in his inner circle. And right after Fox called it last night, they went radio silent. They weren't answering my texts anymore. So I don't know. I mean, I think that right now it's like full force. Okay, transition team take effect. Let's figure out who we're going to have for what. So it'll be interesting, man.
I think you turn around, you talk that. I think, some of those are, just a quick note on Eric Prince. I am not a fan of having any retired military officer be the Secretary of Defense, right? So if you're talking Eric Prince, like he's going state, or national security advisor. Like
a veteran, not just retired, just a veteran, because he didn't retire. He actually separated.
No, good point. But he's still a former military officer, and I don't think any military officer, retired or former whatever, should be the Secretary of Defense. That was the biggest problem with Mattis. Is Mattis would have made a better Secretary of State because he was all about allies and forming alliances and everything like that. The Secretary of Defense should not be doing that. The Secretary of Defense should be, once the Secretary of State says, okay, hey, we got an alliance with these folks, Secretary of Defense is like, okay, what guns and bombs do you need? And then looking around at people and be like, hey, you better step two, you better toe the line, or we're going to come and destroy you. So it just doesn't work. I don't think. That's why I think Mattis, one of the reasons Mattis did not do a great job as a SecDef. Going real quick, and I'm kicking over to Roger, but going real quick back to yesterday, like it cannot be understated, right? When we talk about where did the 17 million voters go from 2020, like I mean that cannot be understated because that was not some just a bunch. We had 98 whatever percent percent turnout in 2020. That did not happen. It's a statistical improbability. And like Roger said, even Reuters now is like, and Rasmussen is like, well, yeah, that doesn't jive with what we've seen today in the record turnout. And just to touch on a couple things of what Trump did yesterday is, if you take a look at Fall River, Massachusetts, it is a city, right? Mostly Portuguese, 16% college students. No Republican has won that city in 100 years. Trump won it yesterday. You take a look at Starr County, Texas, and Luke, you can kind of attest to this. And I was talking to Admiral Dave today. It is the most Hispanic county in America at 97%. Trump won it by 16 points. He won almost every single county on the border in Texas, which is normally those are, I mean, those are pretty blue counties, right, Luke? Generally speaking.
Yeah, and that's interesting about Starr County. I wasn't tracking that, but Starr County is also probably the most corrupt county in all of Texas, if not the whole United States. It's really crazy it went that way. Maybe the citizens of that county, are just like, okay, enough with this border stuff. Enough. We've had enough.
The last time it voted Republican and went red was in 1892. Anson County, North Carolina. That county is 40% African American. Trump was a second Republican to win that county since the 1870s. All right. That's since Reconstruction. Only twice Trump won that county. And when you talk about Bucks County, he won Bucks County, Pennsylvania. Right. That hasn't been won by a Republican since Bush in 88.
What about Erie County? What was the last? I don't know if you have that at your fingertips, but Erie County was what kind of freaked me out. I was like, what? That county went? That's unbelievable.
Yeah. That was actually funny because that was the example this morning on MSNBC. They were like, I don't know how the folks in Erie County are feeling this morning. And the one lady was like, well, they voted for Trump. So I'm sure they feel pretty good. Dude, watching the meltdown on the left, and I don't know if you guys saw it. It's I caught it on X. I didn't see the actual broadcast of it, but they had, I think it was like MSNBC or whatever. They had the big map, and how they had the touch screen and all that stuff or whatever. And they were flipping, and they're like, okay, so now let's show you where the counties where Harris outperformed Biden, and they touched it,
Yeah.
and it was blank. And he's like,
nothing.
Not one? Like, not one county guy's like, nope. It's like, all right, so we'll go back to the previous map. And dude, it was just horrible. I mean, her performance was horrible. What I did think was funny. Now everybody's giving Ann Seltzer a lot of crap. You guys know her, the Iowa poll. Remember that? So she comes out and says, what it was a couple days before the election that Kamala's up by like 3 or 4 or something like that in Iowa, right? And I think Trump ended up winning that by 14 or so. It just goes to show their polling. Like, I don't even know why you have, Josh has said this from the beginning. He hates polls. He doesn't pay attention to any of them, and they're all garbage. And then he's right for the most part. But Luke, what do they do to fix this thing? Well, one, let me ask you this. Do you think polling is going to be a problem once we're done with the Trump era? So sadly, that was the last campaign event for Trump. Obviously, he's going to serve his term as president, can't serve again. We won't see him on the campaign trail anymore. That era is over. So do you suspect that polling will go back to being more dependable without the Trump effect? Or do you think that this is something that's going to occur every election here on out?
I think it'll keep going the way it's going for maybe 1 or 2 more cycles with or without Trump, because they haven't figured out how to do this right yet. I think they will figure it out. I think it'll have something to do with social media, maybe a new method or something, but it's hard to believe that every single major poll was wrong yet again. And there's a lot of theories as to why that is. A lot of people are thinking, well, they just don't know how to factor for Trump, so they overrepresent him, and then that skews the whole thing. And because their polls are so skewed, they just look at what the next guy's doing. It's like, okay, well, worst case scenario, we'll all be wrong. Somebody's going to figure out a new way to do this, because I think, Josh, you got called actually for the first time in your life, didn't you?
Yeah. And I told him I was voting for Kamala Harris.
And that's funny, right? But it doesn't work. What they're doing doesn't work, because, how do you factor in a guy like, Josh? Because if they would have called me, I might have done the same thing. Or, I probably wouldn't have talked to him at all. So doing it over the phone, it's just, I don't know. I think eventually they're going to figure out a better way to do it. But we were all 3 right. It's like, we don't trust the polls. And maybe we were even more right than we knew, because it's like, well, I like trusting the polls when Trump's ahead. So, and Trump even said that on Rogan. But yeah, it's broken. It's broken. Yeah. I don't see it being fixed by next time, or 2028 or 2032. That's crazy, man. We're gonna be old. You realize how old we're gonna be, and we'll be on episode 400 by then.
Yeah. Well, you look at
with 3 listeners.
Yeah. Right. Well, you look at, it's not even the polls they have to figure out. The Democrats have to figure out the Hispanic vote right now, because the Hispanics turned out to vote for Donald Trump yesterday. He took 45% of the Hispanic vote. That is massive, right? And then when you take a look at the African-American vote in Wisconsin in 2020, Trump took 8% of the African-American vote in Wisconsin. Yesterday, he took 20% of the African-American vote in Wisconsin. Like, that's nuts. And, you layer that on with, like, Roger was talking about, you layer that on with Harris's, underperforming. She underperformed in every single category. Biden did better than her in almost every other category. Now, some of that, it's conflated with those 15 million extra votes that, just kind of magically disappeared for this election cycle. But they have to figure that Hispanic vote out, because what Kamala Harris was saying did not resonate with them. And I think a large part of it had to do with the border, where she left the border open. And there's a lot of Hispanics that, they're not super excited that they waited, months, years, to get their papers to, immigrate legally. And then, they just left the border open for, their neighbors just walk, to waltz on in. So I don't think I definitely don't think they like that. And then again, the young person vote. So Biden won the 18 to 29-year-old voters by 24% in 2020. Harris only took 13% yesterday of those young voters. The rest of them all went to Trump. You know, and she underperformed. Biden took the Latinos, Hispanic by 32 points in 2020. Harris only won 8% of that. It's just like they've got some bigger things to figure out besides the polls, because their message did not resonate. And going back and Michael Moore, and he was correct in 2016, and when he warned Hillary before election day, do not dismiss your average working American. Do not dismiss Joe Sixpack, because Joe Sixpack will show up to the polls and is going to hurt you. And that happened yesterday too. I mean, men voted at record numbers. I mean, generally women vote more than men. Men voted at record numbers yesterday too. And a lot of that was, non-college educated, and college educated men, which, generally doesn't normally track, in elections, but they had record turnout on that, and so they haven't figured it out. Hillary Clinton called us deplorables. Barack Obama said, clinging to your guns and religion. They called everybody, they called Trump and all his supporters Nazis. And then, the garbage thing. Oh, they come back and, Trump supporters are garbage. And even my wife, who, again, like she doesn't like political discussions. She's just like, whatever. She's like, you want to talk politics? Go talk to Luke and Roger. You'll have a podcast for that. But that day that, they were like, Trump supporters are garbage, she became very, very vocal, because she's like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm garbage because I don't support you and your message and what you're selling. She became animated, and she became fired up. And, then she started being a little bit more vocal, especially with, some of her friends and stuff like that. And so it's like, don't underestimate that stuff, because that, and I think last point, whoever wants it, I think a lot of people, and this goes back to the polls, I think a lot of people said, I'm voting for Kamala Harris. They went in that booth and they voted Donald Trump. A lot more people were more comfortable. A lot more people were more comfortable coming out this time and saying, I'm voting for DJT. That's my guy. But I'm telling you, a lot of people, to their friends, to pollsters, everybody was like, yeah, Kamala. Yeah, they went in that booth and they were like, I can't do it. No, I can't do it. DJT is my guy. I guarantee you that happened at scale.
The garbage thing is I'm not going to say I don't understand the impact. I get it. I do get it. But to me, that was like, well, my skin's just too thick for that, because I've got every Tom, Dick, and Harry on X saying that Trump is a Nazi. I support Trump, so I must be a Nazi. That's the conclusion I was coming to by, everyone calling him a Nazi. So when Biden, I guess it's who it came from. It came from the sitting president of the United States calling 73 million people garbage. I mean, I get it. That's pretty in your face now that, in retrospect. But at the time I was like, it's not a big deal, until Trump showed up in a garbage truck. And then I started paying attention to people who are really pissed about that. But it's like, dude, you've already called me a Nazi. I mean, what's worse than that? Not much. Not much is worse than a Nazi.
No.
But yeah, it's interesting, because it was episode 40 we did released on November 10th of 2020, where I was told after that podcast, it was an hour and a half long, that we just sounded like three old men bitching, because apparently we were pretty salty. I may go back and listen to that one to hear how bad it was. So this one is just, the tenor of this is just definitely a lot different. I don't know. I don't know how else to explain how horrible of a candidate Kamala Harris was, but just according to the numbers, I think she got more votes than Hillary Clinton. So I don't know.
Probably, but you got more registered voters now. I mean, there's been a big push from both sides, but yeah, she probably did. I think the garbage quote. Now, again, goes back to Trump and the GOP as a whole, especially with some of the older population, because they dove into this stuff. And I forget who it was. It was one of the pundits on Fox. It might have been Britt Hume, who said, well, you have to understand, he goes, garbage back before we get into our attitude era, rated R TV, this and that, or it was like garbage was the harshest thing it was the harshest word that you could use on open air, free air television. And so a lot of people took that word garbage and it hit a lot harder than what it would have probably hit one of us. My whole thing with the garbage thing is, hey man, it goes back to what you guys just said, clinging to your guns and your religion and deplorables and irredeemable and garbage and Nazis. It's like, they are telling you exactly what they think of you.
Yep.
That's the reality of it, right? Because now we're covering several different generations, different eras, different presidencies. This is what the left thinks of you. And this is where it changed from the Clinton years on. That's where it changed, the Clinton and Bush years, right? Once those years were gone, it changed dramatically when Barry took office. Just the overall, I don't know how, the world is so divisive and this and that. And yet, well, yeah, because you're making it this way. I mean, you're not going to sit there. I can't believe, and I don't know what you guys think. Like, I would not have answered the phone. So Kamala called, and we'll get into her speech here in a minute. Kamala called Trump earlier today and conceded, right? Good time to do it. You should have probably done it last night. But I guess the rumor is she was basically stuck in her room and locked the door and wouldn't let anybody come,
I love it.
Oh, dude, it's crazy. But if I'm Trump, I don't even take that phone call just because of like what Luke said. I'm like, dude, you literally called me a Nazi, a fascist, Hitler, and a threat to democracy. I'm not taking your phone call. And then you have Biden, we'll transition and welcome to that White House. My response to that is, I actually don't need that. I've been here before and I did a better job than you. So I actually would prefer if you don't give me any pointers. I don't need your help. Okay. And then, going into Kamala's speech, if you guys want to go down that road, it's not even one, they're not doing jack. The Democrats aren't going to do anything for at least 2 years. So she can sit up there and, rah, 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 and blow smoke up everybody's butt or whatever. But, there was never I never got the sense of like, hey guys and gals, it's unity, right? We need to come together. Let's put the country first, do what we got to do. It was all about fighting and, abortion and, again, issues that I don't think are going to be as strong of a political issue going forward. They're stuck on it, but it's like, there was no unity there. There was no congratulating Trump. And I guess it's hard, right? I guess it's hard to congratulate the guy that you compared to Hitler, 3, 4, 5, 6 days ago. I just, if I'm Donald Trump, I look at the rhetoric, it would be very, very hard for me to get over that. But like Josh says, you've been called worse by better. And if I'm even with the Harris campaign in her speech, it's we're going to have a peaceful transfer. Well, yeah, you're going to have a peaceful transfer because you just got blown the fuck out. That's why you're going to have a peaceful transfer. You're going to have a peaceful transfer because the Electoral College is going to be a landslide and you're going to end up losing the popular vote to Donald Trump by 5 or 6 million people, at least. That's why it's going to be a peaceful transfer of power. Because believe me, if it had been any closer, who knows what happened, man? They'd pull out all the stops, right? You got to go find the votes. There'd be the lawyers or whatever. And this is, my opinion, this is exactly what needed to happen. He needed to win decisively. This thing can't go 4, 5, 6, 7 days. You win it decisively. You win it above the margin of cheating. You put it to bed. It's over with the first night, and then you move on. So I don't know, Josh. You got any takes on? Well, you heard the whole Kamala speech as well, right?
Yeah, I heard the whole thing. So what it reminded me of is, you have visitors and you're saying goodbye, and you start in the living room, and then you get to the front door. And then you get to the porch, and now you're in the driveway, and you're still trying to say goodbye. It's like, hey, because it was getting dragged out. And you know what? The crazy thing is, a lot of people on X posted, they're like, that was probably one of the best speeches she gave.
It was. It actually was. I was going to say that.
But it was also it was a campaign speech. It was a campaign speech. It's like, okay, the campaign's over. I don't know if you were, awake for yesterday, but your campaign is over, lady. So cut it, come out to your 2 minutes, congratulate, Donald Trump, and, tell your supporters wherever you're going to tell, and then get off the stage, because she knew once she walks off that stage, she is fading. She is being discarded to the trash heap of irrelevancy. right? She is never going to be a relevant
Well, I was going to ask
politician
that.
again.
So what's next for her? I mean, we know the DNC it played out, they get rid of her, but like, so in all seriousness, outside of like a super PAC, what is next for her?
I would have no idea because I think if she did anything else, I could look, well, in modern history, if she did anything else, it would be unprecedented because I don't think that that vice presidents go on. I think that's kind of the end of your political career, right? Unless you run for president, when you'd have to look back through history to see if anybody else did. But I could see her, going the John Kerry route or Al Gore, latching on to something and doing something like that.
There's no way that any logical, right? And I'll caveat this with logical Democratic campaign, one, would bring her back as a potential candidate, either for president or vice president, or two, have her involved in their campaign in a very overt way. Not when you just, I mean, it was a landslide. Like you said, it was a landslide. It was a rout. Like, it wasn't even close. And it was a referendum on the last 4 years of your vice presidency and Joe Biden's president. Like, it was a referendum. When you take a look at it, all of your policies that, you did, open borders, you guys promoted transing kids, allowing biological males to compete against biological females, getting rid of, sustainable energy, trying to push everybody to electric, everything, inflation, the economy. They kept saying, like, to a point, you're like, do they really believe this? Or are they just, gaslighting to try and, get to the next finish line? It's like, you can't stand up there and say this is the strongest economy in history when inflation's over 20%. Like, you can't do that. So I think her political career, as far as elected office, is done, because only thing she would be viable for really is a vice presidency or the presidency, and she's not gonna run for any other office. I think it would be weird for her to take an appointment. Let's say whoever wins in 2028, and Gavin Newsom's like, hey, you want to be the Secretary of State or whatever? I don't see that happening at all.
No, that's a step down.
Yeah, she's either going to be president or nothing. And I don't think the DNC is going to be like, yeah, come on back as a candidate. I don't see that at all, because you just got absolutely destroyed by one of the most divisive candidates to run, right? By Donald Trump. Like, you're the second Democrat, that Donald Trump has trounced. And again, I'm going to go ahead and say he beat Joe Biden in 2020. All right. Donald Trump, he had to win 3 times for 2 terms.
That's amazing. Yeah. So you mentioned the market, and I'll ask Roger this question, like the economy. And I thought of the market, and looking at the numbers today. Wow. 1,500 points. The Dow ended 1,500 up, and there's two possible explanations for this. Well, 3, I guess. One is, well, all these earnings just came back great and the economy is roaring, and we just now find out about it. Okay, I think that's very unlikely. The next scenario is the market likes the idea of Trump winning. Or the third idea, or the third possibility, which I tend to believe, is the market likes stability. And that was a very smooth election. Think about it. Think about how smooth that was. The market's like, okay, all right. We're going to put, 2020 behind us. We're going to put COVID behind us. All right, now it's time to charge forward. And that may have a little bit to do with Trump, right? Maybe a little bit. But like Josh put in, the market likes stability. They like predictability. And, you get a nice, smooth election, and bam, it's a more stable country. So I got to, hats off to these states that didn't have their shit together in 2020, like Georgia, Pennsylvania. This year it was pretty smooth, man. It was pretty smooth, and hats off to the North Carolina governor's name. I can't. It's
Roy Cooper.
Roy Cooper for getting those mobile voting stations out there to Western North Carolina. I mean, I was just really impressed with that election. I mean, everybody kind of came together, and I kind of had a feeling last night of, like, we did it. And I said that real early, and Josh was like, we didn't do shit yet. You just wait till you get up tomorrow morning. Then I was like, oh, he could be right. But for now, I'm just going to pretend like, and I'll just be disappointed in the morning. So, Roger, of those three possibilities, which one do you think it is?
I think it's a little bit of everything. I mean, one, the elections did go smooth. It was called in a night versus dragging out for 4 or 5 days. The win was decisive. But I think the other thing is you got to remember when you look at the market, it's all speculation, right? It's like oil and gas. It's all speculation. And well, I'll tell you the biggest factor was that Jim Cramer said that the market, wasn't going to like Trump. Jim Cramer said the market's showing that Trump is going to lose. So if you ever follow Jim Cramer, like whatever he advises you to do the opposite. Right.
100%.
So, that was the number one factor. But I think when you look at Trump's history, okay, because you have past performance, you've got 4 years, and you look at the rhetoric that's come out from him, in the campaign trail, plus you have to look at, dude, he's not running for reelection again. He can do whatever he wants. Okay. He's not beholden to anybody. It makes sense for him to go. He wants to go out with a bang. He wants the biggest economy, the best economy. Now, I will tell you this. It probably will not bode well for our deficit. I tell you that right now. But everything else, man, interest rates are going to come down. Money's going to get freed up, right? You're going to have more money to buy things. Inflation will come down. That stuff will start to settle. You'll see some more of the tariffs on foreign goods. Some of the manufacturing will come back. So the market likes that. They see money coming back into the country. And for that reason, and I think if anything, just the interest rates, I do expect, I'm kind of curious to see what he does with the interest rates, because you can't just move those, right? Because you're dealing with interest rates that are high, and you're also dealing with high inflation. Now the good thing is he's not dealing with the 8-9% inflation that Biden brought forth early on in his tour. So now we're down to about 2.7, but 2.7 is still high. So there's a little bit of juggling there that he's going to have to do with. Hey, man, I might actually have to keep interest rates up a little bit higher for a little bit longer until we can cool this inflation rate. The good thing is inflation was so daggum high under the Biden administration. We've talked about this, how it's calculated year over year. He's got a lot more to work with than like when Biden came in office. When Biden came in office, inflation was below 2%. That's tough, man, because 2% is the goal, right? And I think it was like 1.9 or 1.8 or something like that, if I'm not mistaken. So there's not a lot of room for error. But when you're coming in and you're taking over for somebody, I mean, here's the thing. If Trump just does what he does, we're going to be better off. You can't get any worse. Inflation can't get any worse. I mean, I guess it could if you were, Chile or Argentina years ago, but it's, interest rates are already high. I mean, it really just can't get any worse. So you just don't do anything. It's going to get better. The market will work itself out. And that's part of the problem is you had a lot of government intervention with this. But I think what the market sees right now is a lot of money coming back. But I do believe, and Josh, I don't know if you feel different. I think the national deficit is probably going to take a beating here. Well, it's been taking a beating, right? We're at $35 trillion. I don't know that gets any better over the next 4 years. And to be quite honest with you, we might be to the point, it's like and I don't want to offend any of our, robust listeners out there, but I got a buddy that I think he still listens to this show, but he called it the road to 300, man. Once you hit a certain weight, that's it, man. You're on that road to 300. There ain't no coming back. And I don't know if you think like with the national deficit or the debt, if we're already there, we're already at 35 trillion. I don't know if we're already at that tipping point. Talked about modern monetary policy before and this and that. We may already be there where it's like, hey, it actually doesn't matter now. At 35 trillion, we're not going to pay any of it back. We're not going to be able to pay it all back. So why pay any of it back?
No, I absolutely think we're there. We're not. The national deficit will never be paid off. It will never be paid down. The only thing that we are probably going to look at now is, do we slow down spending or do we, make that money machine go burr? Right. Those are the two things. We will never pay off a $35 trillion deficit because we refuse to have a balanced budget. And that is the only way you can do it. All right. You've got to take in more than you spend. And we are not even remotely thinking about stopping spending right now. We might be, you want to tighten up the belt a little bit, so to speak, here and there.
Now, what about Musk though? And this whole government do you think that could actually have an impact?
I think that can have a huge impact. If Trump is allowed to be the chief executive, because remember, they came back and said that he could not fire people in the executive branch during his first term, which is wild to me, being the chief executive, and I can't fire anybody in the executive branch. That's, I mean, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but I think, especially with Musk, if you do bring him in as an advisor, under the Doge, which I think is fantastic, and have him map out, okay, here's where you can create some efficiencies, trim the fat, but at the end of the day, what authority is Donald Trump going to be allowed to allowed to leverage to do that? So yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, the deficit mattered, I think, until we put 2 wars on credit cards back in the 2000s. And after that, I think that it's like, well, the deficit doesn't matter anymore. It is what it is, because we talk about, what backs the US dollar, right? It used to be the gold standard. We went away from the gold standard. So what backs the US dollar now? You know what backs the US dollar? The Department of Defense. That's what backs the US dollar now. You going to go away from the dollar? Or we're going to free the shit out of you. That's what we're going to do. Oh, you've got some rare earth minerals? We'll be there in a few days.
That's a good quote. You need to Twix that. That's a good one.
Yeah.
If you listen to Trump and believe him, when he talked to Joe Rogan about the debt and paying it down and how we were on our way until COVID hit, it's like, he's a politician, so you got to take it, you got to take all that with a grain of salt, but it did make sense what he was saying. Now, one of the things Trump did say is he's like, you never want to pay your debt completely down because you're underlevered at that point. I don't quite understand it, all the ins and outs, but I get the concept, right? It does help to have some level of debt, but when the interest payments on your debt exceed the amount you're spending on the entire Department of Defense, now we've got a problem. So I don't think the debt's going anywhere anytime soon. But barring another war, barring COVID, another COVID type scenario, which is probably not going to happen, I think we could start seeing our way out of it around year 3.5. Things start rolling. It could get rough sometime soon. There could be a correction coming. All our problems aren't solved overnight because Trump was elected. He's going to have to deal with this. He's going to have to deal with the commercial property bubble that hasn't gone anywhere. We've been talking about that for a long time. The residential housing market bubble. Well, it's not a bubble, but it's in a weird place right now. Trump's going to have to deal with that. And I just hope that your son's friend Roger will give him a little time to sort that out. Because a lot of people are like, man, everything's gonna be great now. Well, you got to wait a little while for that. So, yeah, I mean, I do think, I don't know, like Roger says, it's not going anywhere anytime soon. I don't see it ballooning like it did, in 2020 to 2022. Man, oh man. Woo, a lot of stuff to talk about there. And we could probably do a whole episode. I wanted to give I'm not saying we need to wrap this up or anything, but somebody just messaged me something, a listener. I'm not even going to say his name. He knows who he is when he listens to this, but he said this. Of note, this election ended the way it did for the millions of us that acknowledged our mistakes and turned the car around. That's a good point. He used to be, I wouldn't call him a liberal, but he used to be kind of a Democrat, on some issues. And, I don't know what happened, but he's like, nope, that ain't working. The people we've been elected are not working. So I think what he's telling me there is that he probably punched the lever for Trump. He might have had to hold his nose while he did it, which I understand. But I think, and Josh doesn't, we've talked about this on the episode before, Roger. It's like, Roger and I are really big on picking the lesser of two evils. And Josh is like, nope, you don't pick evil at all. I'm voting for whoever, I'm writing in Rand Paul or somebody. But yeah, so I think that that's a demographic too. That's kind of just, it's taken a few years, but it's like you see it and it's like, okay, this is not sustainable. And, I was talking to Josh earlier today on the phone and I was like, she still got 60 some odd million votes, 67. And it's like, that's 67 million people. That's a lot of people, Yeah. And Josh, hey, real quick before, Roger might have something to say about supporters and maybe wrap up the deficit. But Josh, I don't recall you saying it at the beginning of the episode on what this election did for you personally.
So, anybody who's listened to us for more than maybe half an episode knows that I'm pretty black pilled on on the election, starting with the polls. I don't believe polls. I was pretty black pilled, based off of 2020, based not just the election in 2020, but based off what I saw during COVID, right? Because it goes back to, and I kind of, paraphrasing Jordan Peterson a little bit here. Everybody likes to think that they would have been Schindler in Nazi Germany. No, you wouldn't have. You would have been in lockstep with, the Waffen SS. You would have dimed Anne Frank out if you thought it would have bought you 30 seconds to virtue signal to, the rest of the public and your neighbors about how good you are, about what a virtuous person you are, and about how you follow the rules and stuff. They would have done it in a heartbeat. And so, like, those two things, then everything else, like, that really, really jaded me. And I was, I was down on a lot of my, my fellow countrymen. I'm still down on 66 million of them. But I will say last night restored a lot of faith that I had lost in my countrymen. Like, for, and I'm being dead serious. Like, it restored a lot of faith, because when I don't say when the chips were really down, but when it mattered the most, they showed up and they did the right thing, right? They didn't choose Marxism over the Constitution. And so that made me feel a lot better. Woke up this morning, kind of, mentally in a better place as far as that goes. So yeah, man, it's good. So I'm not going to be as black pilled. I'm still going to be, Dr. Doom, of course, but because I'm me. But yeah, it definitely made me feel a lot better seeing that, what we saw last night.
And I'm going to cut in on Roger real quick and piggyback on what you were saying. A lot of people say this is the last election to save democracy on both sides, right? On both sides. I tend to be like, yeah, okay, you got a point, but the institutions are still very powerful. A lot of people don't believe it. The institutions are very powerful. So, but I do believe we're on a trajectory. If Kamala Harris had been chosen, right? If she would have won last night, we're on a certain trajectory, and the trajectory was in the filibuster, pack the Supreme Court, change the Constitution. I don't know how they're going to put term limits on Supreme Court justices. Those things alone. Bring in DC and Puerto Rico as states. Those things alone would have set us on a pretty bad trajectory. So it's like we're no longer on that trajectory, which is good, but this isn't it. I read somewhere it's like we need 4 in a row. We need 16 years of this at least to set things not necessarily back to what they were, in the glory, in the heady days of, right before Nirvana came out. What we always discuss, what was the high water mark, right? I don't know if we'll get back there, but to kind of reset the trajectory, it's like, okay, all right, we've gone a little bit too far. Let's put a few things in stone here. So, Roger, do you think that we dodged a bullet, toward straight communism, once she takes over, or did we kind of reset the trajectory a little bit?
I don't know if we dodged a bullet. I guess you could say we dodged a bullet, but understanding that there are more rounds coming, because it goes back to kind of what you were saying. And I'm along the lines of what Josh said. What's scary is that she got over 60 million votes. You have 67, and probably by the time all is said and done, almost 68 million people that voted that way. And what was scary for me, okay, beyond the Donald Trump thing or whatever, what was scary for me is if she actually won, then that tells me that the Uni Party is alive and well, and you're going to have to be a Democrat, because you can basically put a basketball there, throw $1 billion behind it, and have it elected, because she ran the worst campaign that I've ever seen in my lifetime, or that I'm at least cognizant of. Every mistake in the book that you could make, she made. She failed to course correct along the way. And again, a lot of that, I think she was set up. A lot of that, those that have power in the DNC kind of set her up. But I was just scared, and I'm still kind of scared, because she still got the 67, 68 million votes. So what happens next time when you put up somebody who's halfway competent? Now, on the other side of that, we know that Donald Trump does a great job of bringing people out to vote against him. So I think when you look at 2028, you don't necessarily have, I don't think a Ron DeSantis will do that. I don't think a JD Vance will fire them up. But of course, you look at the term, fascist, Nazi, Hitler. Well, they go all the way back to Ronald Reagan, right? The Democrats have been calling, folks on the right, those terms forever. So I don't know. It's scary that you get that many votes. I'm glad it was a blowout. I'm glad it was a landslide electorally when, the popular vote, 5 or 6 million people, but you still got 67 million that are voting to take money out of your pocket. I mean, you've got 67 million that voted to continue the train wreck that we have all witnessed over the last 4 years. That's everything from inflation, all your core prices, energy. Okay, hey, your GDP is made up from government jobs. Wages are now down. Okay, I think I saw a poll the other day or a stat the other day that wages are now down like 1.8% under Biden, and people continue to vote that way. People want 4 more years of that. I hate to say it, I've got family members like that, and it's like you can't even reason with them. And I think the three of us, being conservative and generally, probably voting Republican 99.9% of the time. But I don't care if Trump's in office or any other Republican. We've got 4 years of that crap. It's time to change. We're doing something else, right? I'm voting third party or whatever. There's just no way you continue to support that. And that's what's scary to me is the fact that we still got those 67, 68 million people. Josh, you mentioned something earlier about the working class, and I think it was you. I wanted to read this because this is actually pretty profound. It came from Bernie Sanders. He won his Senate race. And he said this a couple hours ago. It should come as no great surprise that a Democratic Party, which has abandoned working class people, would find that the working class has abandoned them. Will the big money interests and well-paid consultants who control the Democratic Party learn any real lessons from this disastrous campaign? And that is spot on with what you and Luke were saying with the working class party.
It's not. I mean, it's not difficult, to look at. And again, it goes back to the three of us could have run a better campaign for Kamala than her campaign advisors.
Absolutely,
like 100%. It's one thing you gotta be able to relate to Joe Sixpack, and that goes to that. People in DC, it's like during the recession of like 2008, 2009, you talk to people in DC and they're just kind of like, what do you mean? It's like, because it's so recession proof, because they're always going to, they're always going to write the government in. It's like, oh, well, you're not going to have to go without your pay very long. If you do, you might miss one paycheck, but you're not going 2 pay periods. And so they're like, well, I don't understand. What do you mean? It's like, you have the Department of Agriculture and they go out to the Midwest and they're like, this looks like, you might as well be on the dark side of the moon at that point, because they don't understand the people. They don't understand the operating environment. They don't understand anything. So, it's not surprising. I mean, I'm a little upset that, Bernie and Sanders and I agree on something. So scary, but yeah, damn, don't ever underestimate, Joe Sixpack. So changing gears a little bit. So, it wasn't just the Kamala and Donald races. We still have some very pivotal Senate races out there right now, or yesterday, and then there's 2 still being decided in Pennsylvania and Nevada. But not only did we win back the White House, we have taken back the Senate. Right now, we have 52 senators elected. We are up. That's plus 3 seats. And depending upon how Nevada and Pennsylvania shake out, we may go to 55 or 54. It's my Florida public school math there. 54, right? So don't have to outright majority, filibustering or nothing. And when it comes to judicial nominations, I want to touch on real quick. When it comes to the judicial nominations, that's huge, because that was probably the greatest accomplishment of Trump's first term, was the 3 Supreme Court nominations and then all of the circuit court nominations. Trump has the opportunity right now to nominate 2 additional Supreme Court justices, Alito and Thomas. Alito and Thomas, I'm having that conversation during the transition with them. Hey, what do you guys think about retiring? And Luke and I had this conversation yesterday. I hate to see Clarence Thomas, not on the Supreme Court. I hate to think of a Supreme Court without Clarence Thomas, but let's face it, Clarence Thomas is no spring chicken. Neither is Alito. And I would rather go ahead and replace them now than take the chances of somebody, a Newsom or a Shapiro winning in 2028 and missing out on that opportunity because something happens to them. Yeah, Thomas is 76 years old. It's time. And then if I'm Donald Trump, one of the first things I'm doing is I'm getting with the Monuments Commission and I'm putting a statue of Clarence Thomas on the National Mall because
Hell
that man is a national treasure. 100%. Yeah, Alito's 74. It's time to have that conversation with them. Like, hey, fellas, you've served honorably, you've done good, you've held your ground. It's time to nominate a 40-something-year-old.
He's going to have nominated 5 Supreme Court justices.
I bet anything. Clarence Thomas is stepping down. Alito, I'm not so sure because he's not as smart as Clarence Thomas and selfless. But you got some other folks on there that are getting up in age and maybe not so good at health, like Sotomayor.
Yeah, Sotomayor. I picture Sotomayor though going the RGB route. I think she's gonna be that stubborn. I'm not retiring until there's a Democrat in office and a Democrat Senate, and then she's just gonna die in the chair.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Is that you never know. I mean, have you seen her? She's not the healthiest of looking people. Like she may.
No. She's not going to step down though.
No way. But yeah, it's you're right, man. That's definitely the most that Supreme Court in like five. It's
amazing,
the least.
Right?
Oh,
amazing,
dude.
And so the other Senate races. I mean, you think about it. In Montana, she unseated John Tester to take one of the Senate seats from Montana. Nevada, we're still waiting for the fallout from Brown and Rosen. Florida, it wasn't even we were already worried about it. Scott beat out Powell pretty good. Ohio, Moreno over Brown. Texas, everybody knows Ted Cruz won his race against Allred. And then in West Virginia, flipped Joe Manchin's seat with Justice over LA and Joe Manchin's seat. So it was a great day, and then you have all the House races out there. I'm not going to go through all the House races, but there's still a lot of House races out there, but it looks like, right now that we're going to have the House majority, back in hand pretty well as well. And so it's game on. It is absolutely game on.
I was kind of hoping
yeah, that's a good point, Roger.
I was hoping that Joe Kent might pull it out in Washington, but that's a tough one. 48.
He's in the wrong state, man.
Yeah, that's too bad. He got 48. That's not bad. It's 59% reporting. But another thing, just talk about Texas. People are like, "Oh, Colin Allred, watch out, man!" It's the same tired old Beto O'Rourke playbook of, "Oh, he's close. Oh, he's close." Man, Cruz trounced him by 10 points. Man, that's a big win. So it's like, you know what? Texas is okay for now. It's okay for now. If Abbott keeps, doing a pretty good job like he's doing, we got Paxton. Josh, you were saying he might be a good one for Attorney General, maybe. Is that what you were saying? Yeah.
Yeah. I think Paxton or the guy out of Missouri who he went after Biden hard. Or, hey, man, Ron DeSantis. Because we have to keep those potential candidates to run with J.D. Vance, assuming that J.D. Vance is going to run 28. We've got to keep those potential candidates in the public eye, viable, doing work.
Yeah. So what happens next, Roger? How does the left react to this? Because we are, my first thought is somebody will get, police officer on camera brutalizing a minority, and then we'll have George Floyd all over again. They're going to probably try to use the 2020 or like the 2016 through 2020 playbook. I don't know. What do you think? Because I think, again, they're just taking a collective breath. They're still in shock. And it's like, okay, which way are we going to go with this?
I don't know that they really got to go that extreme. I think everything is playing out the way they wanted it to play out. Like we said at the opening, the DNC got exactly what they wanted. Trump's not going to run for another term. And that was the whole point, back with Trump is you had to look at a re-election, right? So you had a lot of this stuff that they had to stir the pot. They don't have to stir the pot here. I mean, if I'm the DNC, one, I think you definitely take a look at the issues that you're going to run on, because I will tell you, they tried to use, the abortion thing again, and brilliant move, right? With Roe v. Wade being taken off the ticket, pushing it down to the states, because even Mark Kelly, our senator out here in Arizona, he was on Martha McCallum the other day, and he was like, an abortion rights, a national abortion ban. He said he'd sign it. And she's like, no. I mean, she actually got very confrontational in that interview and was like, no, it's at the state level. Matter of fact, your state, Arizona, is voting on it, which they voted yes. But regardless, it's like, hey, your state is voting on it. And, I think for the Democrats, they used that as an issue again to try to get the females out to drive the vote, but it just wasn't there. So, I think if you look over the next, 3 years, you look over the next 3 years with the first two, it's just going to all be messaging because of the Republican controlled House and the Senate. And the Democrats, I think, are going to hunker down and figure out what their messaging is. And then I think you start looking at who your primary candidates are really going to be. I mean, we've got a list that we started, a couple of weeks ago. I don't know if it's going to be that many, or, we talked about the Bashirs and the Whitmers. You've got Shapiro, you've got Newsom, you've got Moore out of Maryland. So, you've got 4 or 5 potentially pretty strong candidates. Do they all run? Do they all primary against each other, or do you do 2 or 3? So I think that's what they spend the next 2 or 3 years kind of doing and working out what issues they're going to go after. I mean, with the Trump thing, the good thing is he can't be impeached at least the first 2 years. So that's a positive. There's really no need to impeach him on the 3rd year, because by that point, he'll be a lame duck. You'll probably give up the House or the Senate at that point. The good thing is, though, we go up, 53? And dude, do not rule out Arizona. I mean, they're leaning blue. Gallego's got 50.3% of the vote with only 61% reporting. He's up by 80,000 votes, and they're still waiting for Maricopa County. So that thing could come down to the wire. But, you get 53, let's say Brown wins, McCormick, you're at 54. You could potentially be at 55. You've locked up the Senate through Trump's term. So, you probably assume that you lose the House, right? You lose the House after 2 years or whatever, which is not uncommon. It goes back and forth, fairly regularly. So, I think they just have to get their messaging down. It's the, and then you really have to look at, they had $1 billion. Okay. And I'm glad you brought up Texas, because Florida was the same thing. This is where we opened with, like, they started believing in their own lies, because I actually started seeing topics trend about Dems and the blue wave and taking Florida. Like, dude, you are high if you think you're going to take Florida. What Ron DeSantis has done down there in that state, Florida, remember Florida used to be a swing state. Remember the hanging Chad and this and that, dude, not in play. And I think with Ted Cruz, who is very easy not to like, but winning by 10 plus points, again, it's just wasted money and it's wasted effort. It's almost like that, you're chasing the end of the rainbow. So I think there does need to be a concerted effort on the Democrat side to, and I don't know, maybe, I mean, the other side of this, Luke, is they had $1 billion. So why not throw money at it? But I think if they would have taken that time and effort and probably put it into Pennsylvania, Michigan, I don't know. I mean, I think she was such a bad candidate. I don't know if $2 billion would have helped out, minus just straight out paying people to vote. But yeah, I don't know, Josh. You see anything different from the Democrats over the next couple of years?
No, I think what they're, one, they're shell shocked right now, because I think some knew it. They knew what yesterday and last night was going to be, but I think there's some that are genuinely shocked. And so I think for the next 2 years, especially if they don't have, let's say they don't have either chamber, it's going to be, they're going to beat their drums and talk about how, he's racist and, this, that, and the other. But until they take one of the chambers, there's really not a whole lot they can do. What Trump needs to be more worried about is not the Democrats, it's the Dan Crenshaws. What are the Dan Crenshaws and his ilk in Congress, and in both the Senate and the House? What are they going to do to impede Trump like they did during his first administration? Because don't forget about them, all right? Because they are still there. So definitely don't get about them. I guess the real question is, Luke, what does Trump do his first day in office? What's a couple things that Trump does? He comes in, he's like, let's do it, baby. Let's effing go.
Well, he'll be a dictator, of course, on day one.
Of course. Fascist dictator.
I almost yeah, there's so many things on day one, man. Keystone Pipeline, get that running. Anwar, get that going. Even though I don't know how the Anwar thing works. I think he's got to go through. I don't know. But Anwar up in Alaska, tap that. I think energy. Day one is energy. Day one is
100%.
energy, because if you want to, he is right about this. You trace inflation back, supply chain issues, things like that. If you bring down the price at the pump, inflation's going to come down. It's going to come down. It's going to come down, maybe not to the levels we would really love, but it's at least going to stop. So day one, focus on energy. That's what I'd say. Day one. There's a lot of stuff that we should maybe discuss in depth. Our policy proposals for Trump through his 4 years in office, because there is an off ramp for Ukraine, but that's not a day one thing.
No.
And you know what? Here's another thing, and I don't want to derail, but what happened in Pennsylvania, and then what happened later in where was the second attempt on Trump's life? I can't even remember. That's how.
Is that the golf course?
Is that the golf course in Florida, right?
In Florida, that's right. So Florida and Pennsylvania, I'm still a bit worried because that threat has not gone away. In fact, it's definitely gotten worse at this point. I don't say stuff like this often, but the country and Trump are in my prayers right now, because, like I said, that threat hasn't gone away. It could be kind of a crazy time between now and January 20th, that first day. Because last night I very faintly heard two words, very faintly, coming at the same time simultaneously, like when Ben Kenobi heard all those voices, cry out and whatever. I heard two distinct words coming from, and those two distinct words were, "Oh shit." It was coming from Russia, it was coming from Beijing, it was coming from North Korea, and it was coming from Tehran. It's like, oh shit. We've got till January 20th. So I don't know. I think we're kind of on the precipice here. But day one, to answer your question, maybe strike through a bunch of DEI stuff after you've taken care of whatever you can executive order about energy. But Roger, what else on day one? You kind of took me by surprise there, because I do have a laundry list. Border,
right?
yeah.
You look at the border, a lot
100%.
of those executive orders. What I think is funny, and it's a little bit of a tangent here. Did you guys catch Letitia James's press conference today?
She's unhinged, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, here's the funny thing though, is, dude, people are like, they're scared. They are legit scared, because what's going to happen is they have weaponized the DOJ. We've talked about lawfare, and they've weaponized it against that man for the last 4 years, 6 years, actually, if you want to continue on with that. So for at least the last 6 years, and now they're worried because they're like, oh, and this is another reason why all these people came out to support Kamala, not just because she's on the left, but it's like, wow, what happens when the DOJ comes after me? Okay, because and I think Trump's a bigger person than this, but now you've got all these leaks coming out that Biden told his DOJ to go after Trump. Okay, they know that now. Like, he gave explicit instructions for them to go after Trump. And you've got Jack Smith now. I guess he's out the door, right? They're saying he's going to be gone before January 20th. They're saying shut down all the investigations because the DOJ has a policy of not prosecuting a sitting president. I don't know what happens, Josh, with his Senate's hearing in November. Do they just push that off and then it's just squashed? But if you're Letitia James and you're everybody else, you're worried. You're worried because what you've been doing to this man over the last 6 years, he has the opportunity to do it to you. I do think he's a big person, and sometimes, or a bigger person. And I think a lot of times it's the inaction that causes the stress, right? Like when you're getting punched in the face, you're defending, you're bobbing and weaving. It's like, but when you sit there and you're waiting for that shoe to drop, that's where the stress comes in. So what happens with the November Senate hearing, Josh?
So I think it goes away. Honestly, I think it goes away because they know come January 20th, if Trump does not pick somebody like Jeff Sessions, right, to be his attorney general, they know come January 20th, somebody's going to knock on their door and be like, it's time. It is time. And they're going to rip that stuff apart. And they're going to drag, they had fun with Trump. Somebody's going to have fun with them. I think it goes away. I think the Senate scene, it's going to come down. They're going to go, or the Senate scene go through, but it's going to be like, all right, here's a fine time, done. And that's going to be, that. It is not like it's a fart in a whirlwind now. It's nothing. So on that, so I agree with you guys. I think on day one, Trump, I want to see an executive order closing the border. I want the border closed. You got to stop the bleeding, and then we'll figure it out later. At a minimum, it's got to remain in Mexico goes back into effect. And there's no like we let 5,000 across a day. No, nothing. Everybody remains in Mexico until we get it figured out. Pardon all the January 6ers. And then, like you said, the energy stuff. Drill, baby, drill. And get rid of all of those Green New Deal mandates. Every single one. And drill, baby, drill. Because, one, like you guys said, it brings down inflation. And two, one of the greatest things in 2019 was $1.80 gas because we were energy independent. So that's what I think, that's what I like to see on day one. I like the idea coming up with, doing an episode like, okay, here's the policies I want to see from Trump and, kind of diving into them a little bit. But Luke, so we talked about Trump's first day. What does Biden's last day look like? What is Biden doing on his last day besides eating pudding?
I mean, same thing. I think it's like the same thing he's been doing for the past, since after the debate. Nothing. He what'll be interesting is I do think that Biden will be gracious because like we said at the top, we think he voted for Trump, and his doctor wife too. I think he'll be gracious between now and then. Not whatever. It's going to be interesting because I know they have the little meeting. You remember Obama had the meeting with Trump. Trump thought it'd go 15 minutes. They went an hour and a half or something.
Yeah.
That will, I think that'll be a quick meeting with Biden.
Yeah.
He's just not going to do anything. He's just going to eat pudding until they tell him where to be. He'll do something to make an ass out of himself. But I think that Biden is happy right now. I think he's satisfied as much as he can be. Of course, he's still bitter, but it's just like, okay, even if he did vote for her, he didn't want her to win. Yeah. It's because I wouldn't either if I was in his shoes. Good grief.
So I think Biden's, I think his last day, he's definitely pardoning Hunter.
Oh yeah, okay, that's what
I think that's happening. He's pardoning Hunter, and then it's Enron filing management after that on some stuff, right? You talk about going after, him telling the DOJ to go after. Hopefully they preserve their records like the law states should. But again, you don't get to that level by knowing how to sidestep a few landmines.
I don't know if I agree with you guys. I was getting the vibe from you guys that Trump is going to go after people. I don't think he is. I really don't. He didn't go after Clinton, and people liked that. Despite the rhetoric, but yeah, I don't know if he does. But I will say this to y'all's point. It's like if someone has been doing something illegal, I do think that he will go after, or the Justice Department will go after that. If it's just gross.
He has to, though. He has to. Maybe he didn't in his first term because he was like, "Hey, I gotta get reelected, so I can't go, I can't go full, Pol Pot on here." But he has to. There has to be a reckoning for COVID, in a sense, right? There has to be a reckoning for COVID, and if there was massive cheating in 2020, there has to be a reckoning for that. Like that has to be exposed. If he gets it. Trump also said, and I don't know, I doubt we're ever going to see this, but Trump said he was going to release the Kennedy files too. We were finally going to find out, who assassinated Kennedy, and we're finally going to find out if there's actually aliens at Area 51.
Well, he said on Joe Rogan, he said what we said. Why is the reason they didn't release all of them? Well, because it's like we said, because there's people still alive that will be directly affected by the release. That's what he said on Joe Rogan. But he did say, I think it's time.
Just go tell Hillary Clinton that those people who are still alive have some dirt on her.
Yeah.
That problem will take care of itself. and then we can, then they won't be alive anymore. We can release them.
But based on his reaction to, because Joe Rogan, you knew he was going to ask him about the aliens, but just based on Trump's reaction, I think that Trump doesn't even know if there are, whatever. If there,
no, he doesn't know.
Because he's just like, it's not explainable, but he's just kind of vague. But he kind of poo-pooed on extraterrestrials visiting this planet. He kind of poo-pooed on a little bit. It was very unsatisfying.
Yeah. And the alien piece, like I'm convinced there's aliens at Area 51, but I really want to know who killed Kennedy, specifically who within the CIA greenlit that assassination. Because it absolutely came out of the CIA.
I'll spoiler alert the Area 51 for you. Those aren't aliens. Those are humans. Those are humans from, I don't know, 500,000 years in the future. That's what those are. Those are human beings. They don't look like us, but they've got the bilateral symmetry. They're very small. Their heads are big. Not much muscle. Asexual,
so they look like
not
Democrats?
Asexual. What do you call it? Where they're like, angels don't have sex organs. I can't remember what that's called. But
eunuchs?
No. Angels aren't eunuchs.
I know.
What kind of blasphemy is that? Anyway, those are humans. Travel back in time. That's what they are.
I love it.
I don't know about JFK. I don't know about that.
Roger? Biden's last day.
Well, Biden's last day was like months ago. So we already know what he did. It's crazy because, one, I do think that there is a pure hatred that Biden has for Trump. But I do believe that he feels vindicated because what he'll take to his grave with him is, I beat Trump. Trump never beat me. Right.
Yeah.
And so that does, I think that bodes well for Biden as far as his mental state. The Hunter thing, I mean, I guess from here on out, I forget where they're at in this stage, but you've got to push for, I know they brought up charges, but I guess whatever else they're going to charge him on, I guess you got to push the DOJ to like, hey, I need you to bring him up on charges so I can pardon him. Right. Because I don't know if you can, I don't think you can pardon for something that hasn't been charged yet. Right. I'm guessing. I don't know.
Or can you pardon something that hasn't been convicted yet? Because a charge is just a charge. You're not guilty yet.
Yeah, see that I don't know, and that kind of took me down the road of Trump's civil lawsuits. What happens with those, right? Because right now those are on appeal, being heard by a judge. The general consensus is that if he's found guilty and has to pay that, it'll be at a much lower or reduced rate. But even that's appealable. So again, when you've got the power of the DOJ, man, there's a lot of influence that you have with them, right? Luke?
So I have an answer to y'all's question. The president can issue a pardon for someone who hasn't been convicted of a crime yet. This has happened in the past. And you guys will probably know it. When I'll give you a hint. No, I shouldn't give you a hint. In modern history, when has this happened? No, it wasn't Clinton. It was Gerald Ford pardoned Richard Nixon for the Watergate.
Right.
Watergate.
It's called a blanket pardon. Now, I'm not so smart. I had to look that up. But yeah, he can give Hunter Biden a blanket pardon, and everything will just stop. And that's probably.
And I think Trump even brought up, the possibility of pardoning Biden and or Hunter. And I think when you look at what he did last time with the whole Clinton thing, I do see a lot of that. Now, I do agree with Josh that he does have to go after the corrupt system, right? But I don't think it's going to be like this revenge thing. I think, those areas that it's corrupt and needs to be looked into, I think he sicks the DOJ on that. But I'm really curious about the whole civil thing, right?
They're one and the same, though. The people he needs to go after and the corrupt system, they're one and the same.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right about that. And the reality is, until there's some accountability for it. I mean, what I love is the fact that he's going to fire Jack Smith. They're like, Jack is already trying to I pulled up this article on CNN and they're like, yeah, he's already working with the FBI to figure out what they got to do to close this stuff down and just like squash it because it's over with. And it's like, yeah, he's going to be fired come January 19th. So yeah, just terminate that stuff. But the civil stuff is pretty big because, it was a lot of money. It was almost $500 million. He had to put up a lot anyway. And so I'm wondering if it gets reduced. You've got the criminal case up in New York that they're saying that there could be thrown out because of the whole immunity charge. I mean, and again, you've got the DOJ. So if you're one of those judges, you might be persuaded to be like, yeah, let's just wash this. It's water under the bridge. And he's been reelected and let's just move forward. Because I know none of those judges, none of those court systems want the DOJ in their back pocket for the next 4 years. Right.
No, for sure.
And then, of course, Luke says prepare for disappointment. So you don't think anything will happen?
I just don't think he is going to go widespread go after. I definitely don't think he's going to touch COVID because that's a poor reflection on him. He would like everybody to just memory hold that he had anything to do with COVID, that he listened to Fauci even once. And as far as the election being stolen, I think he's going to move on from that. And as far as going after, the corrupt whatever, maybe, but that's why I'm saying I'm preparing myself for disappointment on that because I think he's going to go in and that's going to be the least of his concerns and he's just going to move forward and he's going to go fast. Yeah, I hope y'all are right, but I don't know.
Well, he's got 24 months. Right? He's on and the clock starts January 20th.
I really think he's the kinder, gentler Trump. I really do.
Well, I think we talked about it, and I think that the Butner incident, I think that changed him in a couple of ways. But he just give it to JD because JD is Trump's going to be the kinder, gentler. Let JD be the bulldog, but there has to be some reckoning for some of that stuff. There has to be. It's just. You can't allow in the DOJ must be raised to the ground, right? The rod is so deep there that it has to be raised to the ground.
So
I hope the Congress goes after like the Afghanistan withdrawal. I mean, I know it's like old news for a lot of people, but dude, people need to be held
general in charge.
Yep, people need to be held accountable. And I tell you what, I would start holding those people accountable, and all those people that blew off the subpoenas and Christopher Wray and this and that. And I got nope. It's like now you've got a GOP controlled House and Senate where we can actually impeach you and get the votes. Like, oh no, bitch, you're coming back here now.
You mentioned JD Vance. Do you think he'll show up to the Marine Corps birthday party in DC next week? So, or I guess it's Sunday is November 10th.
He absolutely should. He absolutely should.
He will.
Wearing his E4 uniform. Because he was like an E4 when he got out, right?
I don't know. E4, E5, yeah.
He should totally show up wearing his E4, E5 uniform and be like, what's up? Zipper 5.
Yeah, that'd be off the chain, dude. That'd be crazy. Man.
That would be epic for sure.
Hey, so I want to put this out there, and I don't care what Josh thinks. But we're gonna Josh and I are gonna do something in January. Josh, I don't know if Chris listens or not. He does? Okay. And Chris, one of our Chris's that listens occasionally, we're gonna go to the inauguration. We're scrambling for tickets. Josh may have a line on one. I've done a lot of reading on how to get tickets to it. Number one, it's very difficult because you got to contact your representative, and the representative, a lot of times, if they're active, they will hand those out as almost, either political favors or, hey, you did a lot of work on the campaign. Here's your reward, or, you donate a lot of money, whatever. So they do hand them out. Josh and I both emailed our representatives today. Josh got a more satisfying reply than I did. All I got was the auto-generated email. But Josh looks like he might have a line on tickets. We're activating our network to see if, we can acquire tickets some other way. But even if we don't acquire tickets, we're going to be there and part of the crowd. So, I'll just put it out there right now. If anyone wants to join us, man, we can make it a C3 event and, be at the inauguration together. I think that'd be pretty cool. So, I mean, I'm all in. I'm going. I'll be there anyway. So, Josh and I and our listener, Chris, will be there. So anybody else, just message us, and Yeah.
I don't know.
Just
We
know
might
that-
even have a listener that can help with tickets. I need to ask him about that. Or actually,
Yeah.
I'm asking that listener right now. So we don't have to
Yeah.
we don't have to make this awkward or anything. But hey, if you
Right.
can hook a couple brothers up with some tickets,
And I
let me know.
promise not to go in the Capitol.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Same here.
What was that tweet
Yeah.
I sent out from the
Go to the
lectern
Capitol.
guy? He's like, what did he say? He's like, I took a nap. So am I raiding the lectern tomorrow or what?
Yeah, he was like, I'm going to. The lectern guy, right? He was like,
Yeah.
I'm going to bed. Let me know if I need to steal another lectern tomorrow or not. It was.
Yeah.
It was
They should Trump should appoint the lectern guy as the Secretary of Furniture Relocation or something, like an honorary title.
Yeah.
That would be
So
hilarious.
speaking of which, what about the January 6ers?
That would be great.
Do you think he pardons them?
Well, you left. That was my. That was
Oh,
one
was
of the
it?
tasks,
Sorry.
and I said that has to be part of Trump's first day in office.
I mean, do you
closes
think
the
he does
border and
that?
He pardons January 6th. I think he does. Let me tell you something. If he does not, he is going to lose a lot of his fan base.
Well, I mean, he's not running for a third term, so
No, but his influences elsewhere may be stifled a little bit.
I thought Josh was going to take that in a different direction. That's why I started laughing. I thought you were going to make it like, if he does that, I will XYZ. And I was like, here he goes.
He needs to pardon him because it was all
Yeah,
bullshit.
I agree. If he, yeah, he should have. Yeah, he should for sure. That's a travesty.
Yeah.
How many are
100%.
left? I don't even know.
it's
I don't
a lot
know,
of
and
them,
I'm kind of embarrassed not to know. Yeah, I'm embarrassed not to say I don't know. I'm embarrassed to say I don't know how many are still, in prison. But there's more than one. So that's one is too many.
I think they've served their time, man. I mean, even if
beyond that,
the worst of the worst, who actually, property damage, maybe punched a cop or something. I don't know, but there is nothing. They've served their time. And unpopular opinion, I felt the same way about Bo Bergdahl. He served his time. Fucking let him go. Just whatever.
Yeah.
He served his time, not his time, but he paid his dues, right? These people, regardless of how you feel about January 6th, they've paid their dues, man. They need to be let out.
dude, you throw a brick, you go out here and throw a brick through the window of your public library, you're not going to be in jail for nearly as long as they have. Right. So they've served their penance. Let them go. But
and if you know what we should do, put a pin in this one, because remember after January 6th happened, on January 7th or 8th, we recorded an episode, and I think we all started texting each other. It's like, should we actually release that?
I remember that.
You remember that? Because we said how we really felt about it. And you know what? Maybe after Trump's in office, maybe we re-record that. We've had 4 years to think about it. 4 years of perspective and context. Maybe it's safe to put that stuff out. It's the rawness of it has worn off. But it might be a good time to revisit that. Maybe in January, late January, early February.
So one thing I hope he does, and he's done this with 60 Minutes, he's filed a $10 billion lawsuit against 60 Minutes. And Luke, you brought this up, that this has been, a lot of these things get filed in Amarillo. And I'm reading this article on it right now. So Amarillo is a single judge division that is one of the favored jurisdiction for conservative legal causes. If you're judge shopping, quote unquote, that's where you would go. But I'm hoping he wins that lawsuit. And I tell you what, and this is just because I'm petty and he's probably a much bigger man than I am. But all these people that I heard today on MSNBC and CNN talking about the insurrection and he's an insurrectionist and this and that, I hope he sues them. I hope he sues the crap out of them. I hope he gets his $10 billion from 60. He won't get $10 billion from 60 Minutes. What'll happen is, they'll settle and he'll get whatever and it'll just go away. But that should be a warning shot to those other folks that like, hey man, you need to clean up your act. It goes back to mainstream media. It's like, you need to clean up your act. Like, I don't report the truth, report the facts. And I'm fine with some opinions, obviously, if it's a pundit or this or that and not watching actual news, but when you start throwing things like that out there, it's straight slander. Last thing I got, I hope, and again, maybe I'm just because I'm vengeful or whatever, but I'm just tired of these media heads getting on TV and they just say whatever they want. And it's actually no different than the Kamala Harris campaign. How many times did we hear Trump's Project 2025, right? that many, many, many times over is like, hey man, I got nothing to do with that. I've never read it. It's just they've gotten to the point where they just straight up lie, and there's no accountability for it. So I guess at the end of the day, I'm hoping there was some more accountability. But you know what? You know who else is? That's my last thing. Who else is happy that Kamala lost? The media. I mean, think about it. If you're Morning Joe and you're CNN or MSNBC or whatever, dude, you've got material for the next 4 years because that's all they're going to do, right? It's going to be good for ratings, and it's going to be the hate Trump. And you know what? They may even see a growth a little bit or a spike in their ratings just because you're going to have all the liberal tiers. They're going to, come together and they'll all watch Morning Joe in the morning and, bitch and scream at each other. So that's all I got.
So I got two real quick things, and I'll turn it over to Luke, and he can close us out here. So, all right. So like Luke said, we're headed up to the inauguration. It's going to be a big time. It's going to be awesome. Anybody wants to join us, come on out, and we'll be there. So, two things. Mark your calendars because we're going to this one too. We're going to pick a city, and we're going to go. It's going to be a C3 event. Roger's not going to schedule, his Manny and Petty, for this day or anything like that. July 4th, 2026, America's 250th birthday. Trump's going to be in charge of the celebration.
Oh, it's going to be glorious.
It is going to be on like Donkey Kong in Washington, D.C. for our 250th birthday. It's going to be amazing. So mark your calendars now. And then one last thing, and I will turn it over to Luke. So you go back and you look at the Hillary Clinton campaign, and you look at the parallel with Kamala's campaign, how they ran, right? Kamala called herself a brat, right? And she was all about this, bad girls, like I'm the girl boss, I run the show type of deal. Hillary Clinton was too, like, I'm in charge. I'm, that whole thing going on. But you notice, and we talked about it last night when it happened, at their lowest, at the absolute lowest point, the moment that they knew they were defeated, the moment they knew they could not, there was no path to victory, both of them sent a man out there to address their supporters rather than face them themselves. Very girl boss. So with that, Luke, you got it.
Pathetic. Yeah. That court in Amarillo, Amarillo is a very conservative place, very conservative, but they're not so conservative that they lost their minds. One thing that failed in the election in Amarillo last night was Proposition A, which basically it's a proposal that would effectively make it illegal to use local streets and highways to obtain an abortion out of state. They voted that down because it was a BS law. It was stupid. It didn't fly in the face of Texas law. It was just too much because the way it's enforced, the police don't pull you over and ask, for speeding and say, ma'am, are you on your way out of state to have an abortion? That would be illegal. The cops don't do that. The way this works is you rat out somebody went out of state for an abortion. They're subject to a $10,000 fine. And the mayor is just like, I ain't having that. That's ridiculous. And if you really delve into that proposition, it was kind of unconstitutional and probably would have failed in the Supreme Court. So it's like props to the folks in Amarillo who's like, no, this is insane. This is stupid. This is a feel-good law, and it just doesn't do any good for the community. In fact, it tears the community apart. So good on Amarillo. Shout out to the voters there for voting that down. A couple of shout outs to David in El Paso. Appreciate you listening. And David, who lives very close to me, I found out is a listener. My wife told him about the show. And guys, this is the level of dedication he has. He started at episode 1. Oh God. And I was like, bro,
wow.
No,
I'm sorry.
Just
dude.
go.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. I mean, just go ahead and fast forward, man. Just catch it like maybe episode 50. That's when we kind of started to stop the relentless cursing. But David, we appreciate you listening and we appreciate you looking out for us and everything. So yeah, it's good to be back. We've all been out of town, conflicting schedules. I got stuck in the snow in New Mexico Monday. So that was an adventure we could talk about later, but it's good to be back. We'll put forth an effort to get these out more regularly, but it's been a crazy crazy month, actually. So yeah, Trump 2024. We did it, folks. Appreciate it. Until next time, keep your canteen cups full and tightly secured.